How's it going, everyone? It is I, Anime Outlet, and this is part 1 of What If Deku had a half-destruction, half-creation quirk. And now, before I begin this what if, I'd like to ask all of you to put your what if suggestions down in the comments section below, and just suggest what I should do with this what if. Like, give me some examples, or just say what you want this series to go. Like, you could say if you want Izuku to get one for all, or you could say if Izuku should lose in the sports festival. Just give me some examples or ideas of what I should do in the next parts. And now, let's begin. Izuku would be born to a Quirkless family who was a part of a very long line of Quirkless people. They married Quirkless people and they had Quirkless children. So it made sense to when Izuku turned 4 that they weren't going to take him to the Quirk Doctor. Izuku didn't even know what the Quirk Doctor was, because they never bothered to tell him. They just made the assumption that he was going to be Quirkless like all of the people before them. They were basically Quirkless for generations, and they never had any reason to take anyone to the Quirk Doctor because they knew they were going to be Quirkless. There really was no point to it, and they were just wasting money on a Quirk Doctor visit when they know nothing's going to come out of it. So Izuku would never know what the Quirk Doctor was and just thought his quirk would suddenly appear one day. And that's exactly what would happen. As Izuku would be walking to school one day, he would then walk in to see the rest of his class surrounding one of his friends named Bakugo Katsuki, as Bakugo would be showing them this explosion coming out of his hands. As Bakugo would then tell them, as he would stand up yelling that he's going to be the #1 hero someday, and that all of them will be below him, as Bakugo would then from there start his cocky personality and nature. However, when Izuku got in there, everyone would turn to him and ask him what his quirk was. However, Izuku wouldn't know what they were talking about, as he would say, "Oh, my quirk? I haven't gotten it yet. I still don't know when I'll get it, though." As the class would just nod their heads, as some of them still hadn't got their quirks either. So Izuku would sit down on the carpet, marveling at how cool Bakugo's quirk was. It's just these tiny explosions in his hand that looked crazy. Sure, this wasn't the full extent of what Bakugo could do, but it's insane what it looked like for a 4-year-old. So Izuku would be walking home, as his parents couldn't pick him up that day. As he would then think of how he wanted a pet for so long, but his parents wouldn't let him get one, as he was only 4 and couldn't properly take care of it. So out of nowhere, a orange cat would then form on Izuku's shoulder, as this would be the generation of half of what his quirk was. This would be the generation of his creation half of his quirk. The creation quirk, basically, he has basically 2 quirks, a destruction and creation quirk. And if you're wondering if Izuku has 2 different hair colors, no, he just has basic green hair. I'm really not going to do anything special with that. So Izuku would look over to see this cat standing on his shoulder, as it would then meow at him before rubbing its face into Izuku's cheek, as Izuku would then smile, yelling out that he finally got his pet, as he would then run home to show his parents, as he would then pop open the door and show them, as they would look on at Izuku's discovery, as they would look at it and say, "Izuku, where did you find this thing?" Izuku would just shrug his shoulders, saying that it somehow just appeared on his shoulder, and that's all he knew how it got there. As the parents would look over at each other, wondering what they were supposed to do with this cat. I mean, Izuku probably hadn't even had it for over an hour, and he already looked like he was going to die if they got rid of the thing. So they decided that they can keep the cat. Izuku promised to take care of it, which of course he did. He loved animals, and especially the cat that he just found out of nowhere. So Izuku decided to name this cat Garfield because it was orange, as he had recently watched the movie and just wanted to name his cat Garfield, of course. So Izuku would end up going to bed happy that he finally had a pet, as Izuku would and wake up the next morning to see vines growing around his bed. Izuku had only just started his creation Quirk, as he basically couldn't control it when he was sleeping. He could somewhat control it when he was just awake, but when he was sleeping it would run wild because he hadn't had enough training to keep it at bay. This is one of the many drawbacks of Izuku's Quirk. When he's sleeping, it can just go crazy. So Izuku would end up getting up as his parents would open the door to see Izuku's room full of vines and grass and flowers everywhere, as they would look on in shock, as they would tell Izuku that they're going to the doctor right away and that he's going to miss school for the day. As Izuku would look sad, he wouldn't be able to show his friends Garfield, but he wouldn't care, as that's just all he thought about. He wouldn't be able to show his friends Garfield, but then he looked back at Garfield and would just start playing with him. Izuku is 4, remember. He really doesn't have the attention span that a lot of people that are much older have. So when Izuku would arrive in the hospital, the Quirk doctor would take some tests, as he would then go to Inko and Sashi, who are both Quirkless, and would then say that Izuku has a Quirk, which is quite crazy, as it appears your family has been Quirkless for years, so I'm not quite sure how he could have gotten a Quirk. As Izuku would be smiling that he has a Quirk now, and he doesn't know why they took him to the doctors to see what his Quirk was, but at least he knows he has a Quirk. As the doctor would tell them, he has a Quirk, we just weren't able to identify it. It appears your son had already awakened his Quirk, I believe, as Inko would then nod her head, as the doctor would look down at Izuku, smiling at him, and would say, I'm sure you'd make a great hero someday. As Izuku would jump up yelling, yeah, I'm gonna save lots of people, he would yell in the tiny doctor's room or doctor's office, as Inko would then grab his hand and would then walk out back to their car and would then drive home. As Izuku would be sent back up to his room to play with his cat, as both Inko and Hasashi, which I'm going to pronounce it that way, I'm not sure if that's the correct way, would sit down and would start to talk. How do you think he could have gotten a Quirk? I'm not quite sure, but I think there's still a tiny piece of DNA within us that's from our ancestors that had Quirks. He just got lucky on the draw and somehow was able to get a Quirk. And it appears to be a powerful one, too, because those vines and grass and flowers just grew overnight. Who knows what he could do when he's older and can control his Quirk much more. I think he has a real chance to become a hero, as Sashi would say, as Inko would nod but would be worried. She doesn't want her son to just go off into hero work and then just never come home, because he'll end up being killed in duty or something. So that's one of the worries Inko would have, but Hasashi wouldn't have that, saying that he's sure Izuku would be fine. As Hasashi would then go up to Izuku's room and ask Izuku if he wanted to be a hero, which of course Izuku would yell, yeah, as he was 4 and every kid his age in this universe wanted to become a very good hero. And so from there, Hasashi would start to train Izuku. As the family was a Quirkless family, that didn't mean they trained. Since they come from a long line of Quirkless people, they had to make their own way of self-defense, and this of course would be martial arts and training to get a lot stronger. And so they would do this every single day to each of their children after they turned the age of 10. However, with Izuku, since he now has a Quirk, Hisashi decided to start the training 6 years early, but he wouldn't go as hard on Izuku as he would if Izuku was 10. So Izuku would then begin his training into becoming a hero. As Izuku would go into school one day, as he would then show his friends his Quirk, as he could make vines grow up and down his hands and just do all sorts of things with his creation Quirk. As his friends would look on in shock, saying, whoa, that has to be the coolest Quirk I've ever seen. You can just make anything, right? As Izuku would nod his head, as one of them would ask if Izuku could make a car, as Izuku would kind of be a little confused. Well, I've only made like living things before, mostly plants. I'm not quite sure if I can make non-living things, Izuku would say. This is when he was 8, by the way, as he really hadn't shown anybody his quirk. Everyone just assumed he had a quirk and didn't really want to brag, and that was mostly true. So when they asked if he could make a car, Izuku would start to think. He really hadn't made any, like, material things. Like, he hadn't made anything that was non-living. So Izuku decided to try it, starting with a tiny little car that was basically just a tinier version of a bigger car. And so Izuku would try this, as it would work, as the class would marvel at how Izuku just somehow made a tiny car, as they would then say, yeah, this is much better than Bakugo's quirk. As Bakugo would look on in hatred towards Izuku. How dare he take all of his followers, all of the people that were under him, and take them away from him. He can't be below Izuku, because Izuku is below him. How dare Izuku just defy him and take what was his. As Bakugo would be sitting in his seat, staring daggers at Izuku. However, Izuku wouldn't really pay any attention to this. As Izuku would turn of the age of 10, he would start to train a lot harder, as finally Hisashi would tell Izuku that he is going to start his training that is actually going to be somewhat tasking on Izuku's body. As Izuku would nod his head, wanting to become a hero. His drive was so much bigger than just, like, getting tired doing some training. So Izuku would continue this training until he turned 15, where he would then go to the UA school campus to take the UA entrance exam. As Izuku would be walking in, as he would see Bakugo also walk in, as they would walk into sort of an auditorium type place, as they would then see, or Izuku would see, Present Mike standing on a stage below, as it was sort of like a half circle with a stage in the middle of it, as seats would go up a level as you went. So Izuku would look on to see Present Mike, who would then start to explain all of the tests they will be doing. For example, they were going to be doing the written test first, so they could rest up for the hero test if they were going to be taking the hero test, which most of the people there were going to do. So Izuku would then be passed out a paper that he would get from the seat next to him, as he would grab one and then pass the stack on to the next person. As Izuku would then have his test in hand, as Present Mike would ask if everyone had their test, which everyone would say yes, as he would then begin a 3-hour timer for them to do this test. It was a very, very challenging test. This is one of the best schools in all of Japan in this universe, so of course it was going to be a very difficult test for anyone to pass. It would also be a very long test for someone to pass. So after 3 hours, Izuku would turn in his paper before sitting back down to wait for the next test to begin. Of course, this being the hero test. So when everyone finished the test and the people who weren't taking the hero test would leave, Izuku would then hear Present Mike speak up and would start to explain the hero test. How there is going to be 3 different robots, the 1-pointer, the 2-pointer, and the 3-pointer robot. However, someone would jump out of their seat, pointing at a pamphlet, yelling at Present Mike, but what about this robot here? It says there are 4 robots, and this one looks extremely bigger than all of the other ones. Present Mike would then jump back, a little shocked that someone would stand up and just start yelling at him, as he would then say, oh, that's the 0-pointer. It gives you 0 points like the name says. You really don't have to worry about it. Just try to avoid it at all costs. As all of the students would then be led by Present Mike down into their separate just cities, or where they were going to be taking the test. If they were going to be taking the test, if their last name started with A through Z, or not A through Z, A through M, you'd be placed in one city, and N through Z would be placed in another city. I think M goes before N. I really don't have any bother to check. So Izuku would be placed in the A through M, barely with the M, as Izuku would then go up to the front of the line as he would see the doors open. Rushing in, Izuku would then start to think of a plan on what he should do. Izuku would jump up thinking he has a great idea while also dodging a robot, as he would then create a sword in his hand and a shield in the other, as the robot would punch the shield, but the robot's hand would then start to crack. The shield that he made was from the strongest material that he knew of, and also the sword, while also being one of the sharpest things that he could think of, as basically Zuku's Quirk can just create anything that he thinks of and that he wants. And by now he had learned that he can pretty much control how he sleeps so that his Quirk isn't really active. I mean, it's a tad bit active to where a little bit of grass just grows, as that's just a part of what his Quirk is. So Izuku really couldn't stop that from happening, but it's not even that much of grass. It really just grows in the floorboards, but then if Izuku wants it to disappear, it can, as this would be the tiny workings of his destruction Quirk that still hadn't yet fully awakened yet. So Izuku making this sword and shield as he would swipe his sword towards the robot, slashing cleanly right through it, as Nezu would look on at Izuku's sword cutting right through it and would just be completely shocked. Not even a master swordsman could cut through the metal that the robots were made out of, as this was one of the strongest materials Nezu could buy. However, Izuku's material he made his sword and shield out of wasn't anywhere close to what you could buy. He basically made a new material so that the robots couldn't punch through it or do anything. Rather, if they punched it, they would end up getting hurt. So Izuku would go around just easily slicing through these robots at very high speeds, as he had learned how to be very quick and efficient with a blade, since that was one of the things he learned after turning 10. So Izuku would easily go through slicing all of these robots, as the teachers would watch, just completely confused on how any of this was happening, while also marveling at the technique that Izuku had with doing this, saying that he could even possibly be a hero in today's world just right now if he just got a Quirk license, as some of them would agree with that statement while some of them wouldn't. Nezu would look at Izuku just saying, well, I guess he's definitely in Class 1A, there's no doubt about that. He easily has enough points to be in either of the classes, but his skill, I think, unmatches anyone else in this exam. So I think we should also put him in another type of extra training class, just to give him a little more. Well, actually, I'm not quite sure. I'm still thinking about this all. I can't really think of too many decisions right now, as there's hundreds of other kids taking these tests. Why would we just close in on one student and give him all of the resources? That wouldn't really be fair. But we should probably give him some disadvantages, like maybe wearing weights so he cannot keep up as much with the other students so that they don't feel left out. As Nezu would then think, but Aizawa would step up saying, this is a hero school, Nezu. How do you forget that? You're the principal here. It doesn't matter if someone has advantages or disadvantages over the students. If you make it into the school, it doesn't matter. You made it, and you're supposed to be smart if you're in this hero school. You shouldn't be whining about someone being stronger than you. As they would agree, saying, alright, I guess Izuku shouldn't have any disadvantages. I guess it was just a stupid question to begin with. As the test would then be finished, as all of a sudden, right as the test announcement that it's finished, a 0-pointer would rise up, as Nezu would look down to see that the button mysteriously had been pushed. He wasn't sure how this could have happened or if he pushed the button and he just forgot, as this button would then rise a 0-pointer out of the ground, as Izuku would look at it completely confused. He swore he just heard the test was finished, and all of a sudden he would hear a girl yell for his help, as Izuku would rush over there to see a brunette-haired girl being held by this zero pointer, as the zero pointer would grab her and raise her up as if he was about to drop her, as Izuku would jump up, grabbing on to the zero pointer's leg, and then hopping up using his forward momentum to jump up at higher speeds, grabbing Uraraka from the zero pointer while also slicing the zero pointer's hand off, as they would then start to fall, as Izuku would then reach over to one of the sides the rooftops and side of one of the buildings near him, grabbing onto it while also grabbing Uraraka's hand as she would slip out of the zero pointer's grip, which had loosened because it was now not even attached to the zero pointer. As all of a sudden the zero pointer would end up deactivating, as Izuku would pull Uraraka up to the top of the building. And that's where I'm going to leave this What If off, guys. I hope you all did enjoy part 1 of What If Deku had a half destruction, half creation Quirk. I'm sorry if the What If you voted for didn't get picked, but hopefully maybe it will be my next What If, or maybe the What If after that. And thank you to everyone who voted for any of the what ifs on the poll on my community tab. I thank you all for watching once again, and goodbye.